Security is a challenge along the eastern border too, and Pakistan plays no small part in it. In the teeming camps housing more than 600,000 Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, a quiet insurgency is brewing. Myanmar's military brass is already losing sleep over it after an ambush on one of its convoys a few days back injured 2 army personnel and 1 civilian driver. This ambush is suspected to be the work of the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army or Arsa. Some reports say the outfit has claimed responsibility. WION has not been able to independently verify who was behind this attack. But if it is indeed Arsa, it raises a host of questions even for India. This ambush took place on the 5th of January near Muang Dao, a town in Myanmar's western Rakhine state. Myanmar Army intelligence believes a group of 10, possibly even 20 men, some of them armed, crossed over from Bangladesh and trekked to the attack site 15 kilometers away. How could they trek so far without being detected is still a mystery. Now this is where it gets interesting. The Myanmar military seems to have broken down the method of this attack. A mine or improvised explosive device was detonated on the convoy's route. It was done remotely, probably through a mobile phone or radio transceiver. Automatic rifle fire rained down on the convoy from high ground opposite. After a brief exchange of fire, the gunmen withdrew. The use of IEDs or mines and remote detonation are as old as the hills. The blast was low intensity, suggesting the explosive was fabricated locally. But the Rohingya are never known to have had any expertise in this area. The use of the automatic rifle suggests a supply source has now been established. The question then is, who is paying for all of this? By all indications, India's western neighbor. And this could be the prelude to more powerful weapons, probably rocket-propelled grenades and machine guns being used by the Rohingya terrorists. And this would tie in with the Myanmar military suspicion that Arsa is running a clandestine training center near Teknaf in Bangladesh. In the coming days, in fact, Myanmar will probably share details of the attack with India. The manner of the attack and the weapons used would confirm the view of many in India that it was justified in declaring last September that the Rohingya had terror links. The Union Home Ministry had even indicated that it would share information with the Supreme Court showing Rohingya links with Pakistan armed groups. The Home Ministry later submitted an affidavit to the Supreme Court. It justified India's stance on deporting 40,000 Rohingya refugees. It categorized them as illegal immigrants. There was also, in fact, evidence of illegal transfer of money to them. Rohingya refugees have been in India since 2011. They've settled in 6 states, including Assam, West Bengal, Jammu and Delhi. How did they manage to reach Jammu, for instance? Who took them? Who paid for all of this? All these questions still remain unanswered. But WION has been reporting from these regions over the past few months. Earlier this week, in fact, we showed you how Rohingyas at a refugee camp in Bengal's North 24 Parganas admit that they entered India illegally. So while the world preached Myanmar and slammed India for turning away these so-called hapless souls, this should be a wake-up call. In fact, on 21st December last year, WION was the first to bring you a report on how Pakistan wants to lure displaced Rohingyas. At the center of the story was the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army or Arsa once again. WION investigated Arsa's links to Pakistan's notorious intelligence agency, the ISI. And here's what we found.
The influx of Rohingyas into Bangladesh has been one of the biggest humanitarian crises staring the global community. The mass exodus has posed a major challenge to the Bangladesh government. The refugees have added to the struggle over limited resources in the country. But there is another threat that the refugees pose before the South Asian region. Pakistan is hatching a conspiracy with Rohingya terror groups. That is what Bangladesh's Transport Minister Obaidul Qadir claims. The Bangladesh government has discovered that Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI, is behind a plan to radicalize displaced Rohingyas. Qadir could be hinting at Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, which has been linked to Pakistan-based terrorist groups. Last year, India and Bangladeshi intelligence agencies chanced upon fresh evidence that revealed the inner workings of Arsa and its links with the ISI. Intelligence officials intercepted 3 telephonic conversations between 23rd and 24th of August in 2017. Raids and further investigation by Bangladeshi authorities revealed the involvement of Brigadier Ashfaq and Major Salamat of the ISI, who were in touch with Hafiz Tohar, the military wing chief of Arsa. One such call was made on 23rd of August, where Tohar received instructions to hit multiple targets within the next 48 hours. Attack right after the black man submits his report.
Yes, sir, whatever you say, but it cannot happen before the night of 24th.
The ISI officer wanted Arsa to attack right after former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan submitted his report on the Rohingya crisis. They spoke again the next day, when Brigadier Ashfaq ordered Tohar to launch terror attacks as soon as possible. Here is another excerpt. When is the black man making his report public?
At 3 p.m, in a few minutes from now.
Why are you taking so much time?
It takes time to convey the message.
The Arsa became a subject of global news coverage when they struck 30 police posts in Rakhine on 25th August 2017. 12 people were killed in the attack. The refugee crisis poses a massive security challenge for South Asia. It's a concern that the Indian government has also raised. ISI's involvement with Arsa raises more fears that the Rohingya crisis could be used to foment more trouble in the region. Bureau Report, WION.
If the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army did indeed carry out the attack on January 5th, it adds another element to India's eastern complex security environment. The first concern is, how will Myanmar act? In the past, the Myanmar army has carried out cross-border operations in Thailand in hot pursuit of insurgents. There is an understanding that the Thai military will not prevent the Myanmar army from crossing over. But it's unlikely the Bangladesh military will allow the Myanmar army in its territory, largely because the Myanmar army is regarded as anti-Muslim because of its atrocities that were allegedly inflicted on the Rohingya. The public and political parties in Bangladesh may even pressure the ruling Awami League to take a tough stand, which may result in clashes between the two armies. So that's a no-no. Incidentally, the two armies are about evenly matched. The Bangladesh army is probably better disciplined, but it's difficult to predict who could win a conflict which would devastate them economically. India will be caught in a bind, having to choose between two neighbors whose goodwill it has cultivated for decades. Things could get worse if the Arsa unleashes a broad insurgency in Rakhine state in Myanmar. This could well test the Myanmar army's capabilities. It is already stretched by insurgencies in other parts of the country. And this could spiral out of the Myanmar army's control, turning Rakhine into a religious battleground, a jihad in India's backyard. And this would provide just the opening for Pakistan to step in further, to make more inroads. There's also nothing to prevent the Arsa from linking up with anti-India groups in Pakistan. It already is working with some. It could be the Kaplang faction of the Naga rebels in the east, or the United Liberation Front of Assam, ULFA, whose leader Paresh Barua is based in Yunnan in China. Evidence is not lacking about China's links with northeast insurgent groups, including ULFA. China has meddled in Nagaland in the past. It could reopen that front to include the entire northeast, destabilizing that region. So the concerns for India are very real here. All of this, though, is not to say that there aren't victims of this tragedy. Men, women and children, thousands of them, have been unfairly caught in the crossfire and forced to flee their homes. The plight of the Rohingya refugees has become one of the world's biggest humanitarian crises. Nearly 1 million of them have had to flee persecution in their own country. And now that the Aung San Suu Kyi government has agreed on a repatriation timeline with Bangladesh, the worry for these refugees is that they may return to the same situation they escaped.
The plight of hundreds of thousands of Rohingyas is the world's fastest growing refugee crisis. They have risked death by sea or on foot and fled the destruction of their homes and persecution in the northern Rakhine province of Myanmar since August last year. The United Nations calls it a textbook example of ethnic cleansing, but the Myanmar military has denied targeting civilians. claiming they are fighting Rohingya terrorists instead. The exodus began in August 2017 after Rohingya terrorists attacked more than 30 police posts. Rohingyas say they fled after troops backed by local Buddhist mobs responded by burning their villages and attacking and killing civilians.
An insurgent group has waged a movement against the government in Myanmar. We moved to Bangladesh in the face of their atrocities. This group had confined us for 8 days in our village and did not let us go outside for groceries or even to get water. After some days, we got to know that they had killed many Burmese Hindus in Fakira Bazaar, which is 2 kilometers away from our village.
The Bangladeshi city of Cox's Bazar, bordering Myanmar, is where a majority of Rohingyas have set up camp. Men, women and children with barely any belongings have sought shelter in these areas, with little access to aid, safe drinking water, food or healthcare.
This is just a stretch of the Cox's Bazar roads, and I've stopped by here to find only Rohingyas stopping and sitting in these tree sides and roadsides, waiting to be able to find some home in the makeshift camps that are being built in various parts of this district in Cox's Bazar, mostly in Kutupalong and Ukhia and places like this in the bordering states.
The Rohingyas are one of the largest ethnic minorities in Myanmar. Rohingya Muslims represent the largest percentage of Muslims in the country, with a majority living in Rakhine State. Myanmar is a predominantly Buddhist country, but the government refuses to recognize them and has denied them citizenship and even excluded them from the 2014 census. For the Myanmar government, Rohingyas are illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. The Rohingya crisis has become a massive humanitarian catastrophe. According to Doctors Without Borders, at least 6,700 Rohingyas were killed in the month after the violence broke out. Amnesty International says the Myanmar military also raped and abused Rohingya women and girls. At least 288 villages were partially or totally destroyed in northern Rakhine, according to Human Rights Watch. The whole Rohingya refugee population, which is almost 1 million people, require food aid. More than 21,000 children under the age of 5 have been treated for severe acute malnutrition. Keeping the Rohingya refugees alive and healthy requires at a bare minimum enough shelter, food and water, medical assistance and toilets. Even 6 months after the exodus began, humanitarian agencies are struggling to keep resources in place. Refugee camps are too small and the number of refugees is increasing by the day. Geopolitics is only complicating matters. For both Bangladesh and India, where most Rohingyas have fled to, the refugees pose a security risk. After massive pressure from the international community, Myanmar agreed to take back Rohingyas from Bangladesh, and both countries have set a 2-year deadline to complete the repatriation process. But for the Rohingyas, the worry is that they may return to the same situation they escaped. Bureau Report, WION.